right, sorry about that. All right, so what is the Eve IP? Well, an IP is a brand, okay? And the brand is a collection of characteristics and paradigms that establishes an idea, concept, or product as being unique and distinguished from competitors. Now, the Eve IP is a total experience made possible by its architecture, first and foremost. The game design based on that architecture, the content which supplies the game design, and ultimately the storyline which supplies the content. Now, if I click this, yeah, there we go. Okay, so what does IP management have to do with architecture, game design, and content? Well, the answer is because each of these defines a unique part about Eve. For our architecture specifically, it's the single shard. For game design, it's our sandbox approach to the features that we add to the game. As far as content goes, our content is all about empowering player development specifically, and then ultimately our storyline is a science fiction setting that is ultimately about the human story. So the single shard is specifically what allows for true emergent social behavior in the game, in the actual game universe. One shard means that one player really can make a difference in the game world. It exploits human nature in the sense that self-interests aggregate, coalesce, and form groups that often find themselves at odds with other aggregated self-interests. And this is an organic driver of conflict. One shard means that everything is connected. All player actions, however subtle, resonate throughout the game universe. You are affected by the actions of all your fellow players in some way, be it indirectly through the market or directly through actual combat. Now, the sandbox, we throw that word around a lot, but let's talk a little bit about it. That's the idea of our approach in game design when we use a sandbox mentality is that we do the best we can to stay out of the way of emergent behavior. Game design merely provides the tools that players need to manage that behavior or shape it to their advantage. It's game design which uses this unique architecture to provide virtual experiences that are just as compelling as their real-life counterparts. Your first PvP encounter, whether you remember it or not, got the heart going probably just as fast if you were nearly in a car crash, okay? Game design determines a lot about how the storyline in the actual game setting has evolved because of things like, say, the death penalty. The reason why the heart races during the PvP encounter is because the death penalty, the consequences for losing, are so high. It's because that penalty is so harsh that the game experience feels so alive. Every single time you encounter someone that you don't know in space, you are risking your implant, your clones, your stuff, your ship, your modules. All of it is on the line during that case, and that is because you can lose all that and lose it persistently. That's what makes the experience come together for everybody. Now, content, our approach to content is specifically that it is intended to empower players. Using the precepts of game design and content, we prepare players for the sandbox. We want to immerse you deeper in it. By far, without question, most of the players that have been traditionalists in the sense that they rarely leave the confines of Empire space come back to us and tell us that the best thing they ever did was go out to 0-0 space. But this isn't a very compelling argument if you look at what the server map looks like during peak hours. People still spend the bulk of their time internal. That could honestly be just because they haven't heard the good word or because they're risk-averse individuals. But in either case, what we're trying to do with the content is specifically to empower you or embolden you to take greater chances. Content is not intended as the end game for Eve. It is just the beginning, a stepping stone, if you were, for a much more significant experience. Now, our storyline, okay? Our storyline, first and foremost, is about the human story, which is really what Eve is all about. It exists to support content and game design and to draw the attention of an outside audience. The message, hopefully, that is loud and clear to everyone that reads about our stuff is that you can become, the iconic figures depicted in the lore. They exist today in 0-0 space. Many of them are here at the Fanfest right now. Okay? The storyline just lures people in where they discover just how deep the rabbit hole goes with the single shard. Now, does this mean that I control any of that? Well, The answer is, no, absolutely not. All I do is whisper into the ears of those who do and make the best case that I can to preserve and evolve Eve according to the principles that have served it best. For example, now this is just purely hypothetical conjecture here, okay? If I were to hear any talk whatsoever about instancing, I might reply subtly back to the person that I don't think this is really consistent with our core elements of the brand or what it is that we do here. If, for example, someone were to suggest, well, why don't we actually increase the rewards for level 4 missions, I might politely reply back, I'm really not sure. I mean, we're doing a pretty good job of empowering players enough. I don't think they need any more incentives than they do right now. If, for example, and this is the last time I'll bother you with this, any talk were to surface of, say, completely removing Concord from Empire space, I might say that's probably not a good idea. We have way too many players in, it just wouldn't go over real well. So essentially, the intellectual property of EVE Online is essentially the confluence of many, many different subject disciplines that overlap with each other. And the IP is where they all overlap in the diagram there. And, we have game design, content implication, storyline, how we market the game, how we preach the message about EVE and try to get people to engage themselves in it. All I do in all that is just essentially whisper, although I do tend to do it rather loudly at times. Where I spend the bulk of my time is specifically working with the storyline. And I don't know how that happened, but it had something to do with this. And ultimately, the expansion that came after it. You may have noticed that all of our trailers, our teasers, a lot of the content that we've been producing has sort of coalesced into progressing a storyline that began with the Empyrean Age. You've noticed it for sure, certainly in the Chronicles. You've noticed all of our different mediums for expressing the storyline of EVE have been integrated in such a way that they're all telling different parts of the same story. Now, this increased visibility of the storyline is intentional because it is the interface between EVE and the uninitiated. Compelling tales immerse people immediately. We need to show that EVE is a dynamic place. It's always in motion. It never stagnates. We need to provide the world with a science fiction setting that they want to become a part of. Its value is to provide a glimpse of the game world. The audience for a setting tends to be much larger than the audience for super competitive gamers, the ones who want to conquer the single shard. Those guys actually, percentage-wise, represent a very, very small portion of our player base, but they also are the most visible because they take the greatest risks and the greatest chances, and power to them for it. But here's a little bit of irony. We're using a linear storyline approach to a gameplay experience that is anything but. That is not an accident either. This fella named Nathan Myhrvold, he was the chief scientist over at Microsoft during the 90s. He once said, and I tend to agree with him on this, that human beings are incapable of thinking exponentially. Instead, when something changes exponentially, we think of the fastest linear change we can imagine and then extrapolate from there. Technology doesn't drive people to do things they've never done before, no matter how technologists may want you to think. The single shard by itself doesn't compel people to collaborate with each other. It's a tool that empowers them to do what they would have done all on their own, completely naturally. Okay? It's a very difficult sell to people that are uninitiated with the EVE universe. People think of themselves as a singular point, and their universe is contained within this point. But how do you tell them the message that once they get into the game world, there are infinite numbers of possibilities, interactions that could lead to other interactions, conquests that could lead to friendships that could ultimately lead to a real-life friendship? It's very difficult to sell the idea of a social network or social gaming with just the exterior meter and the single channels that we have to reach an external audience. So the linear approach that we use to storytelling is a common frame of reference that can lure an audience into a setting, but it has to do the following. It must use iconic characters to humanize, to personalize the game to outsiders. Don't take for granted, you folks in this room here, that your ability to identify with the spaceship makes you unique individuals. A lot of people have a hard time with doing this. They just can't. The personification of the self through the avatar is extremely powerful psychological concept in gaming. And walking in stations is that was one of the specific drivers for it. As Torfi explained just before, character creation process is really immersive for a lot of people, and then once it's over with, that's the extent of it. You exist only as either an apocalypse or a Megathron, a chat screen, and a two-dimensional portrait of yourself. We need to do more to personify it. Okay? Don't forget that iconic ships in famous science fiction IPs like the Millennium Falcon or the USS Enterprise, those ships by themselves would be nothing without the iconic characters that are at their helms. It is those characters that made the ships famous, not the other way around. The other thing that we need to do in our linear approach is that we have to hammer home the message that one person can make a difference. Every single one of you has the intellectual capital that you need to go out and conquer an entire region of space if you find yourself so inclined to do so. Everyone, it starts off with the exact same things in Eve. You start off in that little Ibis or that little rookie ship or whatever, and every single, well, unless you went out and bought the account, but we don't want to ruin my speech here, okay? We want to provide a glimpse of just how deep this game and its setting really are. To do this, we use something called the integrated storyline approach. Just as good marketing plans integrate all the different tactics, channels, and targets under the same message, we too are using all the resources at our disposal to integrate our storyline. Until the Empyrean Age, our storyline was very stagnant, and since then we've made a lot of changes. It all starts with the main plot. In between expansions, I sit down with members of our storyline board, some of the most talented people I think that I've ever met in the world, certainly creatively, and we hammer out a plot, and we synchronize this plot with the expansions. And essentially, the telling of the story of this main plot manifests itself in three ways: through ambience, with the help of our extremely talented volunteer team, Mercury, the Eve storyline board, and news articles that Mercury produces. Then we also have Chronicles. Chronicles, we are blessed in that we have Healthy. He's a great, brilliant writer. You're going to see more and more of his stuff, but he really forms the backbone of keeping our storyline going. We also have Infodumps. Naughton produces a lot of these also. These are essentially just descriptions of a specific aspect of a game that isn't a narrative, but more of a fact list told in a way that's easy for role players to aspire to. And lastly, there are videos. These are the most time-consuming to produce, but they really bring the message home to a much wider audience than we can reach through text alone. Trailers and teasers that impart actual consequences in the storyline. Now, where this expands into the greater IP of everything else, the connection is that storyline's existence is there to support the game design specifically as much as possible. Okay? The next is our brand promotion. We need to convey core brand elements consistently and expressively everywhere the name Eve is found. And lastly, there are our specific expansion features. We need to show as much of the actual expansion and as much of how the actual Eve universe has changed in our visual content and text as much as we can. But are we perfect? Well, I get this email a lot from various members of our vocal community, and the answer is no. We're aware of our deficiencies. Thank you very much. Reason why this has come up, I'm trying to find a silver lining here. Work with me here. We are victims of our own success a little bit, to the extent that because we've raised the visibility of the storyline so much, we've seen a very strong resurgence in the number of people that want to actively participate in it. Case in point, the CSM has passed the motion for us to specifically address events, or the lack thereof, just last week. I'm going to talk a little bit about this right now since I have your attention. There's two reasons why events went away. The first one sort of has to do with the volunteers that made them possible in the first place. Aurora as a program had immense potential, but presented unique planning and logistical challenges. Here's the thing. A volunteer is someone that is exactly that. They're volunteering their own time, okay? We can't always count on that, nor do we feel comfortable forcing people. So listen, you have to be here, or there's nothing I can do about that. In order for us to be able to count on a world-shaping event, we need people that report to us whose evaluations are important to their livelihood in order to bring together all the different pieces that we need to in order to make something significant happen to the storyline. We can't always count on that with volunteers. There are some that always go above and beyond, and they're still with us today in Mercury. Some of them have actually gone on to work for us full time. It's nothing against volunteers per se, but in terms of actual strategic planning, it does become somewhat problematic to work with. The next thing is the inability to control the risks inherent with providing volunteers with information or tools. That's not specifically speaking to malicious intent. It could just be an accident. For example, I am a volunteer. I am friends with people in a corporation in Eve. My friends in my corporation know that I'm a volunteer and know that I'm not around certain times because I am volunteering. That could break an event. It's completely unintentional. It's completely accidental. But these things happen. And in order to maintain the kind of presentation, experience, and immersion level that we're striving to reach, it does present an issue that sometimes can't be navigated successfully. But by far, the most important reason why the old event system of old went away is because of its lack of scalability. We are a single shard, okay? Events need manpower and processing power, and participation in these events cannot be exclusive. But the drawback with that, it tends to draw large numbers of people to one spot. Now, that's less of an issue now because of performance. Let's hear it for Stackless.io. But it is more of a problem with the fact that sometimes you have to deal with this guy. You're hanging a big neon sign around your neck saying, please gank me whenever you broadcast to the world you're going to be at an event. This tends to be an immersion breaker for a lot of those uninitiated to the ways of Eve. Okay? Events can be hazardous to your health and your stuff. That's the reality of it, and we're not going to change that. We're not going to afford any extra protections to people that decide to participate in events. They should be subject to the same risks just as anyone else. That is core to our sandbox philosophy. Factional warfare, though, remains by far the best in-game mechanism for facilitating events. It is the most logical touch point between the actual game and the storyline. As a feature, as we said earlier today, factional warfare is not complete. If you want to move the completion of this feature up as a priority, I suggest you do so through the CSM. It has our attention. We are taking notes. But please don't forget, it also needs to be reconciled with all the other features that need to be addressed. And a lot of those features tend to be addressed by the size of the segment that actually participates in them. But factional warfare would represent the first step towards creating a truly epic event system. Remember something, guys. 80%, at least, in my estimation anyway, of the people that work for this company started as players. We loved events too. I remember Crillier like it was yesterday. I was there for Saram's coronation. I got to write a book about what happened after that. I was really inspired by these events. Big events are a lot of fun. But don't forget that the real story will always be in the deepest part of the sandbox. That will always be the case. The essence of the game is interacting with real people over real assets, not NPC ones. Events implementation is competing with a host of other, and I dare say sadly, more important features that need to be revisited with our game, such as sovereignty in the UI, and just take a look at general discussion to see the whole other list of things that we need to fix. So a few parting words here in conclusion to all this, and that's going a lot faster than I thought it would, but that's good for you guys. Always remember something. Eve is a living, breathing world in a virtual sense. IP management is a shared responsibility between artists, writers, engineers, and designers who all ascribe to the same vision. We can and we must evolve the game while still holding fast to the core essence of what brought Eve to her 5th Fanfest. We wouldn't be here without you. For the storyline specifically, we're trying to shatter unrealistic stereotypes that have in part contributed to the stagnation of the IP. We can evolve, for example, we can evolve the races without destroying their soul. This is a typhoon. We start with it. This was the emblem of Mimitar practicality, working on, with the best they can under the worst of circumstances. That was then. Look at how they've changed. This evolution has not just occurred in the storyline, it has occurred in the art. The Mimitar are learning. They're getting better, they're getting stronger, they're getting their national conscience back on track. This is an evolution. We don't want to keep them always as downtrodden slaves that the old backstory participated in. This was the downside and the danger of a stagnating IP. You become subject matter experts on all the stuff that's out there, remembering every single detail, even when it's an inconsistency. And that mires the world in yesterday. It does not keep it dynamic. And as a single shard, as a game that prides itself on emergent social behavior, we would be remiss if we didn't apply the same principles to its fiction as well. Okay? Paradigm changes in culture are based on momentous events. Pick up a newspaper today and watch what's going on around the world and tell me that this isn't going to change things fundamentally for entire cultures and people. Leaders daring to cast aside old traditions make the universe so much more diverse and dynamic. Okay? We are human, and so are the inhabitants of Eve. We are differentiated by our cultural expressions and history, how we dress, for example, or the engineering characteristics of our stations and our spacecraft. So it will be also in Eve. Indeed, all people and nations change. We will continue to change and evolve Eve as time goes on as well. My last thoughts before I open this up for abuse is please tell your friends about us. I mentioned this earlier today, but the game experience of Eve changes drastically when you enter this game universe with a friend. It makes all the difference in the world. It is very difficult, as I explained earlier, to convey the message and the infinite number of possibilities just from, say, a banner ad or even just from a chronicle. You need to experience this with someone and get through the game world, explore with a friend, start a corporation together. It really does make all the difference in the world about whether or not this Eve brings something positive to you. All right? Our job, our mission, our belief, or at least my own, and I try to affect other people with it, is that we should show the world a vision of where we can go with our IP. I look at, I wonder, will we ever be able to build these things, these stations? Will we ever be able to travel between stars and that kind of thing? That is a personal appeal to me in science fiction personally. And as long as we keep evolving it, we will hold fast to that, and we can ultimately someday, if we so choose, if we keep having FanFests and these FanFests keep growing, we could ultimately provide the complete virtual reality science fiction experience from the ground to every single dropship, starship, airship in between. We can get there someday. It just takes vision, commitment, and remaining core to what's carried us this far. And ultimately, all of our employees, whether you're writing code, writing stories, painting art, composing music, our aim is always to create and inspire. We've inspired you enough to get you to fly out to the North Atlantic for us, and we've managed to do so for the last 5 years. I'd say we're doing a pretty good job for some, but ultimately we'll count on the rest of you to spread the good word about what we're trying to do here. So that's all I got. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you. Does anyone have any questions about the IP, Eve, the book, whatever? The floor is yours.
Yeah, I have one question about the Eve story. To what level are you going to take it? Are you going to make a movie of some part of it?
We'll take it as far as fate lets us take it. That's really the answer. Of course, it's just purely a question of whose attention it gets. I mean, we can't produce a movie by ourselves, obviously. It depends on, like so many other things. A good idea spreads virally. It spreads through word of mouth. If there's enough buzz about this, if it catches the attention of the right people, why the heck wouldn't we? We'll take it as far as we can with the resources, and we're committed to that. I think we proved it with the Empyrean Age. It brought a lot of value than we had previously utilized before. And, I can't even tell you how happy I'd be if we ever got offers for a movie. It'd be fantastic. Yes, sir.
I was wondering, how is this storyline department structured? Who writes and how many people write the missions and the main plot, the political development, the characters, and so on?
The plot is decided by committee. Okay, we have, there's a whole, actually, you should definitely check out the presentation the storyline group specifically is doing, but I don't want to take anything away from them, but it's the header, I don't know their dev names, but it's Scott Holden, Matt Abraxas, Russell Bailey, who's sitting right here, myself, Noah's Hammerhead, he's technically on it as well, and essentially we look at where we've been, and we get an idea of what the actual expansion content's going to be, and then using that criteria, we build a plot around that. And once we decide on, again, I don't want to take anything away from their presentation. They'll actually show you this madhouse in action, and it is not something that is done by one person alone. Everyone contributes something different to it, and that's core to our integrated storyline concept. It's that we have content guys in there. They're going to be writing missions that use that as an expressive medium for telling part of the same big story that we're all in tune with. So, yes, sir.
Do you see any interleaving between the player politics of 0-0 and the overarching story? Is there any way you can do that?
Events is how we want to do that. Here's the thing with integrating player actions with the storyline is that we have a long lead time for actually producing world-changing type material. Like, it takes time to write a chronicle. It takes time to produce a video teaser. Yeah, we can do it with news articles, but is that really serving the event the justice that it deserves? I'm really hoping that the next iteration of factional warfare has an event system built around that, specifically so that we can do things like involve, groups of players that actually fundamentally change, like actually form a milestone in the progression of the storyline going forward. So right now we can't do that, but that's the ultimate vision of it.
An event that, if let's say it succeeded, it could disadvantage a 0-0 alliance, and that would motivate them to actually go and oppose it.
Yeah, absolutely. But first, we've got to let alliances into factional warfare. I mean, no. You're absolutely. Listen, I mean, we said this earlier. We knew we were taking a big risk by. It was a necessary risk. There was no discussion to be had about it. But by not allowing alliances to participate in factional warfare, we would pay a price for that in terms of immersion, and collective player interest being able to impact an NPC storyline. That was just. But we will revisit this, I assure you. Yes, sir.
With the novel, that was, as you said, integrated into the world storyline, and presumably a sequel would be as well. But in the future, do you think there'd be any scope for, at a lower level of the storyline, a kind of a wider, broader franchise of the fiction?
Yes, but we need to, in order to manage an IP, basically what we need to do first is to just settle, for starters, clear up all the inconsistencies that are in the backstory first, because the thing is, if we let people do that, it needs to follow the construct of the IP that's been established so far. And if there are inconsistencies in the IP as it stands now and they go unaddressed, and then we let that next tier, well, then essentially we built on top of a shaky foundation. Unfortunately, Russell can speak to this specifically, it is a very time-consuming process, because we are working on an RPG, and that context alone made us realize how much stuff we had to fix. I mean, I didn't even know we had test tube children. I completely, does anyone even remember? I mean, the last time I created a Caldari character was 5 years ago. Sorry, I forgot. It's just a thing. And we're trying to get a handle on all the stuff that's out there. And once we do, then we'll have things like a style guide specifically that we can give to writers. I would love to personally, I don't know that we'll ever get the budget for this, but I would love to be able to take entire segments of the universe and give someone ownership of them. So you've got the Amatar, you've got Conids, you've got Mordo's Legion, you've got the system, and then we'd bring all these people. Then they would participate specifically when we sit down for our meetings for actual storyline plots, and they could say, there's a role for you here, there's a role for you here, or we construct it in such a way where we could kind of exist sort of detached, be cognizant of the events going on in the main storyline, but progress that storyline as a subset to that, and then there's a dynamic in there that maybe interacts on some high level through trailers or teasers or something with the main plot that's going on elsewhere. But it is a long-term goal, for sure. Yes, sir?
I just wanted to note that print publishing is actually the longest lead time of anything we do. When Tony's talking about the lead times and stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, to do actual world change. Like, here's the thing. It's so a player event would have to take place today, and we wouldn't get to actually impacting the story in like months from now. It might not even be relevant. That's the other thing too, right? Are we commemorating an event that's yesterday's news when other players have done things that are even more grand in scope than what was captured then? These are some of the things we have to reconcile. Yes, sir?
Question about the book. The Fanfest a year ago or something, they were talking about the shades of grey in Eve.
Yeah.
But I really liked the book, but I wondered whether the shades in the Amar or in the Galente.
Oh, Amar. Everyone gives me so much grief over Amar. Oh, no, here's the thing. I think that you're right. For the Amar, it was a little biased in the sense that it reflected the lousy leadership of the reign. I mean, we needed to bring these empires to a collision point somehow, and unfortunately, that requires vilifying someone. As a general precept, and why not vilify the Amar? They're the biggest empire. They're the ones with the big golden ships. They've been around the longest, and they've been the most illegitimate of all the empires because they haven't had an emperor or an empress for years now. So, as a general rule, when people say that Eve is a dark place, we're kind of really referring to moral ambiguity. I mean, it's the kind of thing where a person's actions are purely contextual. It may be evil on its own, but in the moment, given the circumstances, it may seem like the right thing to do, whereas to an outsider it may seem horrible. Where you don't have that gray, where those moral dilemmas are not an issue, you have something called sadism. This is just when a person just decides to be horrible because he can and for no other reason at all. Unfortunately, that would be the Amar in the case of the book. But hey, someone had to be the bad guy here. I'd be hearing this if it was, the Federation, the Galentians too. Nothing personal against Amar. My apologies to all you Amar role players out there.
Smaller guys, not just the leadership, was particular.
See, the thing also is that we needed iconic characters. We needed to, in order to really advance the storyline, we need to put actual figureheads in charge of each empire. That's the thing. I mean, we couldn't, like the Kaldari state for too long really didn't have one unifying figure to it. I mean, the Federation has had a president that's been there forever, but there was a lot to reconcile with this, and this was ultimately, I mean, again, nothing against Amar, but someone had to be the bad guy here, so. Sorry, this gentleman here.
I mean, the old chronicles and theocracy, I think they somehow laid the ground for the noble.
Somewhat, yeah.
And there is a lot of things that that are going on in the background.
Yeah.
And it seems faction war is just the first step, and everything is going to blow up very horrible. And I mean, your presentation seems to foreshadow that even more when you say that you'll change the races without destroying their souls.
Yeah,
So we're approaching something really big.
Well, how do we define big? I would say first reserve any judgment till the end of the Fanfest. But I will say that, I mean, the other big handcuff to telling a story like this is again, the game design mandate that, no one race would be able to pummel the other one into existence. There'll never be a point where you can't create a Minotaur character anymore because they've been bashed to bits by the Amar. So we things had to be left kind of open-ended, and that's another handcuff to storytelling. So when you exist to support game design, you have to work within those boundaries. So, yes, sir.
There's a sort of small but loud subsection of the role-playing community saying, well, these chronicles are nice stories, but they're not useful to us. Now, I don't agree with them, but there seems to be this group that's asking for nothing but info dumps. How do you sort of respond to that?
Well, the info dumps are definitely something we need more of. I agree with that, but I kind of disagree with. I mean, a narrative is just another expressive medium for describing a setting. You know, if you're looking for a specific, like a checklist of things to base your IP around, maybe you ought to take another look at your RP a little bit. I mean, I think that's a little. I mean, it's like the universe changed from this stagnant pond to a dynamic place, and I think two people got hung up on the fact that it changed without their help. You know, and it's understandable, but only to the point where I've always thought that role-playing was reacting intuitively to the cards that are dealt to you specifically by the game universe. How you react to these world-shaping changes defines your character.
So the arguments on the IGS and the League Library and stuff, they screen around.
I've had to harden up quite a bit. Sometimes it's painful to read this stuff, but I mean, I guess that's when you hang your stuff out there for other people to judge. That's just an inevitable part of. Hey, I mean, we're Eve. We know about forum flames. Believe me. Yes, sir.
When the actual patch for Empyrean Age came out, it was a 24-hour downtime, and a lot of comments were made about one of the most exciting things about the patch was the fact that there were these news bulletins for in-game news that was getting posted about all the stuff that was going on in the game while it was going on. And the in-game news, what's the process? How does that work? Is there like a group of people that report on it? How do they determine what they report on? Ouch. You know, there used to be a way that you could submit, you know, leads. How often is that watched? I mean, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on, you know, in 0-0 that I would assume that empires might take an interest in. And in the past, some of the things were actually tied in. There were like little comments made by Empire, you know, the Empire space, like, wow, you know, we have noticed what's going on out there. But that seems to have kind of trailed off in the last, well, quite some time. So what's going on with like in-game news? Because it's a little thing, but it's something that people see every time they log in.
No, it's a big thing. I mean, I don't have actual metrics for how much. I think people focus so much on downtime news because it was, you know, as Hilmer says, it was the only blinking light for the whole game. You couldn't play the game. All you could do was read the news. I don't have metrics for how many people actually click on the links in the client, you know, when we post in-game news, but we definitely need to do a better job of integrating what's going on and align space with what's going on. I mean, at least raising awareness of it, you know. I mean, we can. I have to discuss this with guys on the board about, you know, brainstorm ways where we could possibly have those events interact directly with the storyline. But I think one of the problems that we've had a lot with reporting on Alliance News specifically is getting the damn story straight. You know, we've been accused in the past of biasing, you know, well, I guess that's no different than, say, like Fox News versus, you know, CNN or something like that. But we get, you know, if we had ways, okay, so if we knew ahead of time that a conflict was going to happen, who do we go to find out, you know, what really happened there? And we need a system to eliminate as much of the actual, like writers. I mean, we have writers, but they're not reporters. You know, we can't ask them to go out and find facts and stuff like that. It's a lot of time. They need better tools, and we need logs to show what was blown up, where these things happened. We need to get a statement from both sides and report on it as objectively as possible, and let the readers come to their own conclusions about what happened. So we will inquire specifically into how we can better automate or make the job of potential aspiring reporters in the game easier to get Alliance Warfare more visibility, for sure. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the posting stories and being biased and stuff. I mean, how afraid are CCP of being biased? Is it so bad? I mean, that just adds an extra level to the story. Sure, lots of forum playing. That would be forum playing.
You're right. That's a fair point. I guess by this point we shouldn't be too afraid of getting scorched, you know. But at the same time, I think it's the reason why it's gray is because you don't want to detract from the efforts of people that really did contribute something significant to that we miss. You know, that plays equally into it as well. I agree. I agree. Anybody else? Sir.
I'd like to know, is the story going to go that far that the fifth race is actually going to join the game?
Which fifth race? The Jovians? The Joves. Well, they have. They're in the sequel. The problem with Joves, again, this is we're handcuffed by the game design. No one could figure out, besides pure immersion value, what practical value they would bring to the game. All right, without naming the names of any of our fellow competitors in the industry, introducing a new race that tends to be powerful is a recipe for bad things. And the last thing we would want is just to introduce them to the game and then suddenly have everyone in the game just switch over to that race, and then what happens? So we haven't quite gotten our heads around that, but the Joves are the great enigma of the IP, really. Everyone's fascinated by them, specifically there's so little out there on them. And we joke around about it. We say, they're kind of like prime fiction spackle. Whenever we have a hole in our fiction, we just paint it over with Jovian shit. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's Joves. We're responsible for your node failure, No. Yes, sir.
My eyes, but it keeps coming up with people constantly repeating the word Enheduani. How much? Oh. Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting thing because I always view this as being like this conspiracy theory that's sort of throwaway thing in the background and not really there to touch on reality. But people seem to see them behind every corner of every little thing that happens. I'm certain somebody's applying it to this thing that's going on with the asteroid mine.
There's no such thing as UFOs.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not a listen. I mean, I can't imagine participating in any kind of IP or storyline where there weren't mysteries that were unexplained. You always have to have that element of intrigue and wonder, and it's fun to let people speculate about what this stuff's going to happen, or else again the universe. As soon as everyone becomes a subject matter expert on the EVE universe is when people stop playing the game because it doesn't bring anything new to them. They know everything that there is. At the same time, we have to balance that with just the natural. People want to see resolution to these conflicts and find out answers to things that they may have wondered about. But I mean, you know what? Here's a chance for me to rant. I got so much grief for the whole telepathy thing of Gemma. It's just, but no one talks about the one character who was determined to find out what was causing it. It's just like, this is not some mysticism thing. This is science. His name is Marcus George. It's like, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I'm not buying into this miracle nonsense. No one talks about him. He was the natural balance to that. And without giving away anything about the sequel, I will say that when you find out how she's doing it, it's splashed liberally all over our website and our content. You're going to be like, of course. It's science fiction. Here's something else. Here's another. I was at Gen Con for the first time in my life. I've never seen so many stormtroopers in one place. I was just amazed by it, and the overwhelming thing that sticks out about the place is how much hack and slash sword and fantasy stuff there is versus science fiction. Science fiction as a genre is dying, all right? And I think that part of the reason why, not the only reason why, if something that kind of defies physics happens in a fantasy type IP, it's like, wow, that was magic. It was some kind of spell, whatever. If it happens in a science fiction setting, all of a sudden everyone's an astrophysicist expert. Everyone's got PhDs, and no one could just. You got to understand. It's storytelling in science fiction. The science is just a prop. It's just an element that you use to facilitate some kind of interaction between two characters. It's not important to get hung up on the details, although some people inevitably will. But it doesn't surprise me that that's why the genre as itself is getting smaller, because, quite frankly, hardcore science fiction is becoming more and more of a reality, right? That's the thing. We have to take some leaps of the imagination and just, leave some things just being, it works. It's a black box, and somehow we're able to travel faster than light. And
That's what so many people complained about with Star Wars when Lucas introduced his midi-chlorians.
oh, that killed the IP. It totally. It would. You know what? It was a mystery. It didn't need to be explained. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, it did not need to be. But the fact that it gave it away was inevitably, no matter what the explanation. Oh, so that's how they do it. And just like that, the Force, which was a cool little Yeti-looking dudes being able to move big things like that, it's gone. That's a perfect example actually of how not to. But then again, George Lucas is the way it was best described to me. Okay, let's say you're a little kid and you have all your little action figures on the driveway and you're playing. George Lucas just backs the car right over the fucking things and just crushes it. He doesn't get out of the way or anything. But that's his game. That's how he does it. We try to be a little bit more civil with our IP. So,
Tell us how you really feel.
you have no idea.
So you don't get invited out to Skywalker Ranch then? They're not going to let you go?
No, man. No. We hope that our big thing is, we want the story in particular to be able to stand out on its own and be attractive to people. Even if they don't play the game, we'd at least like to be able to reach them through science fiction and through the stuff that's out there. I mean, and that needs to be reconciled, though, ultimately with the game. There's some things we gloss over. I mean, the book told, obviously, a lot of things that you can't see in the game yet, but it doesn't detract to talk about them because it's fun to know that it's there, and that the game as a virtual world is heading towards that experience that's described there. That's what we're saying when we say, create and inspire. Show the world a vision of where do you want to go? Where do you guys want to take us? I mean, if we didn't care about your feedback, we wouldn't have bothered with the CSM. We certainly wouldn't bother with Fanfest. Having to face you guys is intimidating enough. I mean, it's, you talk about people flaming on forums. Now here we are. All right, come on, bring it. Let's see it. You know what I mean? It's a different kind of dynamic. So yes, sir.
What do you think about player-added fiction of the game, like Clear Skies or other sorts of things?
I think Clear Skies blew me away. It was just fantastic, and kudos to them for winning the how do you pronounce it, Machinima award. We'd actually been there a couple of years, and we'd submitted trailers to it, but it's really not the kind of thing that they're looking for. They're looking for actual acting, and yeah, exactly. And it's, again, most of us that are working with the company now tried to produce something like that. I mean, our video producer now, Greg, he did Destiny Never Fades, I think, that trailer. He did that all on his own without the tools he has today. I mean, because we had an opening for a video producer, we hired him, because he gave himself selfless to the game. We watch all that stuff. It's remarkable, it really is. It's a beautiful thing. So, what do you think, fellas? I'm watching my little clock timer here, and I'm waiting for it to get to 60 so I can get out of here. So, yes, sir.
Something about the novel. Eve is a game where players interact.
Yes.
Get this dynamic feel.
Yes.
And I really like the novel, but there was the dying divine capture here. Was like mapping it on the plots, tying them together. Why did you decide to go into that direction instead of making it like without this interactive?
So say that again. The dying capsuleer, the guy's name. He was okay. That whole plot line was a way to make the idea of an immoral capsuleer accessible to those who have never played the game before. You needed to take. There's a strange symbolism here with religion. Actually, I just realized this, but it's the idea of sending a son down to be among man, so that man can understand him and understand the divine and go there. So that's kind of like the purpose that he served. Okay, it's how do you explain this concept of immortality and pods and pod juice that keeps you nourished and stuff like that? We needed to a specific angle to explain this to the uninitiated. So the way that you do that is that you pull him down off his pedestal, and you make him one of us, you know, and he sort of, the way he was treated by the people that found him. I mean, some people were in reverence of him, some people were scared to death of him, and some people hated him, which tends to be true with the elite in society. They fall into one of those three categories. They're all over tabloids, and people hate them, or groupies love them, and some people just wish they'd go away forever. You know, so that was the rationale for introducing that, you know, the capsulator in that fashion, you know, to make him accessible essentially to people. So, anybody else? Yes, sir.
Just in regards to dying capsuleers and game content, why do corpses still weigh 200 kilograms each?
It's bloating from ingestion of too much pod fluid. I don't know, I just made that up. There's various infelicities that need to be cleaned up. Can we file a bug for it? Can we file a defect for this? 200 kilogram corpses. No, what? Packing peanut. Actually, most corpses lose weight after they bloat first and then they lose water weight or something. I don't know. It was some episode of CSI that I saw where I learned that. I don't know. Yes?
How to control the power seat with the super weapons with the MR, and I didn't it shows with it, but now they know where to get more viewpoints.
Wait till the end of the Fanfest. A clue will be present there, not the end of it, but you haven't seen the last of it or heard of the last of it. I'll say that much. Yes.
You're gonna be able to.
Sorry.
No. Okay.
No. Go ahead.
Okay. There's email coming out. Is that correct?
Yeah, I gotta start writing it. It's ATA would be the end of 2010, early 2011. It's been since the, you know, again, a lot of it depends on the game design, and this really worked well integrating the two. I think it made the feature itself a little more immersive and that kind of thing, and we want to make sure we can replicate that going forward. So once we have a clearer picture of that, it'll continue. All right, no problem at all. Thank you all for coming. I will try to integrate as many of the old characters as I can, but I will say that character development, it was practically non-existent in this book because there were like 40 to 50 of them. And then looking at the book was already it's like, I got to put a stop to this somewhere. You know what I mean? So I'd like the next book to focus more on some individuals and give them time to resonate more with the audiences in this one. I just haven't figured out which ones yet. I know which ones I have to, but I don't know which ones I want to yet either. Yes, sir. You had something to say. Yeah. Fight for it. Topic of clues?
Telepathy thing you got so much grief about. I think there is one pretty big clue how she does it, or at least what caused it in the Imperial Age novel.
I'm not going to tell you what it is. Theorize, speculate. It's good for you. You know, that's good for us. No, I can't. But I will say it's good old-fashioned science fiction. Yes, sir.
Are there any plans or ideas floating around about adding more relics into the game, such as like the Eve game and things like that?
More relics? Wait till the end of the Fanfest. The answers are coming. The answers are coming. Yes, sir. I don't know. Honestly, it fell out of the sky. I mean, just timing, being in the right place at the right time. I mean, I'd started playing Eve in 2003, and I because I was just so into it. I mean, I had a totally different career going. I was working for a brokerage firm and doing IT consulting and stuff like that. And I began writing fiction and just giving it to them, and the company was growing. And when it got to the point where the company was ready to start hiring more people from all disciplines, they're like, we've worked with you so much, why don't you come aboard? It's just that simple. Every now and then the sun shines on the dog's ass. It happens. It's rare, but it does. That's how it rolls. And when I was a kid, I didn't say when I grow up I want to write a book. I mean, writing, was the only thing that wasn't an uphill struggle for me to learn. Suck at math, for example, but writing and communicating, these things tend to, lend more to my natural strength. So I just did what I really enjoyed doing. And fortunately, that synergy aligned with what these folks here in Iceland were doing. So I have no advice to give on how. So, yeah, it's just an accident. Some people get hit by lightning, other people win lotteries. I won this, and I'll always be grateful for it. I always will be. So, yes?
Fanfest, is there any title to attention?
Just wait. Just wait for the announcement. There's a lot coming. We never stop evolving this. Our priorities change. I mean, that's part and parcel for the IP. Our priorities definitely change. We tend to react to things, But I think say for certain that this next thing, but by the end of this FanFest, you'll be flying home with stuff to talk about. That's for damn sure. I think. Sure.
I actually quite like the broker in the book. Is there going to be a conclusion to that one?
Oh man, he is a dirty SOB, the broker. He, some people hated him. Some people was like, do a machine a solution to everything. You know what the broker represented to me? All of us can have multiple accounts. That's what the broker represented.
To be honest, I just like the fact that he was using the technology basically to actually screw with everybody.
I think he was a great character. I mean, he's got a problem though. He's not as much ability as he has. He's that too, and he's dying. He's got issues that he can't exactly go to a doctor to get a prescription for. I'd like to work with him a little bit more, but I gotta, To answer your question, yeah, I'd like to see more of him too. I thought he was a real, he had a lot of potential, a lot more potential. So, anybody?
Why was there only one of them?
Well, he could make copies of himself. Why not more? I don't know. Maybe they're there and they're just not saying I'm a broker.
I meant that why would not any capsuleer activate multiple clones so that he could?
Capsuleers can't. There is a reason for this in one of the scientific chronicles, and we've discussed it endlessly on the storyline board, and just take my word for it. They can't do it. It's
personality disorder, they go a bit nuts.
Yeah, they would. That's one of the reasons they. Well, you tried doing a couple of things at the same time. See how that works out for you. I mean, I can't. No, just kidding. No, I don't. There is a reason for it, but I can't remember what the technical reason for it is.
The fact that when the two things recombine, they can't reprocess the double information.
Yeah, I think that sounds familiar. I don't have it all memorized, man. I just, I rely on so much on the team to help correct me when my memory just fails. Increasingly so as I get older, I find. So yeah. Where's my team? Oh, well, some of them are sitting back there. The rest of them are giving a presentation later on for their own. Go to the storyline thing. I think it'll be interesting for some of you guys to see how all this stuff works and how it all comes together. So, guys, I'm a couple of minutes over here, so please enjoy the rest of the FanFest. Enjoy yourselves here. Have a great time. Tell your friends about us, and thanks a lot for coming.